I said to the person I formed with, like, look, this is not what I want to be doing. Let's just call it quits. At that time, I was like, oh, maybe this is not for me, you know? Got 6 weeks left. I have to find an idea. Maybe I should just go back to doing the art consultancy stuff. But was like, look, you've got on this thing. Everyone here's smart. Everyone here wants to build a business. Everyone here's got the willpower to see it through. Let's just roll the dice one more time.
So when I was doing my research, I saw that you coined the term cultural data scientist. Now, firstly, what does that mean? And secondly, what does that mean?
Right. So the way I explain that is, you know, you have lawyers.
Yeah.
And you have accountants, right? So you have a tax lawyer. You have a sports lawyer. You have a lawyer for music. You have a music lawyer. You have people, death lawyer. And same with accountancy as well. You would have people who are accountants for a particular area. When I was I am a data scientist, but I was doing it in the art market and in the cultural space. So I was like, okay, can I use this opportunity to position myself in an interesting way? And without sort of explaining to people, I'm a data scientist in the art market, or I'm a data scientist in the cultural creative sector, I was just like, what if we just do cultural data scientists? It cuts to the chase, it gets to the point, it's much more transferable. And then I started to roll with it, and people started to refer to me as a cultural data scientist. And I wrote a whole blog post around the logic behind doing that. And yeah, stuck with it ever since. That's
amazing. Because the word cultural, it can mean so many different things. And you mentioned in particular art. So how do you, so that you could have called yourself like an art data scientist, for example, but what other elements of culture do you look into other than just art?
Yeah, so culture is a quite loaded term, actually. You know, you've got people from the business sector talking about culture, which is more like business culture. More traditionally, you have people from the creative industries talk about art and culture. Then you have terms like the cultural industries or the creative and cultural industries, which is what the UN and some other big governing bodies use to, as an umbrella term to capture that particular industry. So fundamentally, a culture is a way in which a segment of humans from different parts of the world or different towns. You can have cultures very, you know, on a small sort of town, a small place. Cultures really can be grounded in place, can be grounded in time. You can have a particular culture across time. So yeah, cultures across different dimensions, but fundamentally it's human. And I don't try to get too much into the debate around the semantics and the meta meaning of culture, because you've got anthropologists that have been doing cultural studies for a really long time. So yeah, it's not a silver bullet, it's not a perfect term, but when I talk about me being a cultural data scientist, it's very much applied to the creative and cultural industries. But that doesn't mean that there can't be another cultural data scientist who's doing something about culture in the West Indies or Indian culture or something like that. So I think it's an open and flexible term.
Because what kind of questions do you answer? In fact, let me take a step back. When did you get interested in putting together being a data scientist with elements of different cultures?
Yeah, so actually, I want to go all the way back to me studying my A-levels at school. I did maths, economics, geography, and fine art.
Wait, what?
Yeah, very, very broad mix.
Yeah.
And at the time, I've always been interested in cities, right? So I've always been interested in cities as places where culture happens, where innovation happens, where exchange happens. And so when I was doing my A-levels, when I was sort of 16, 17, I had this idea of like studying architecture, because it was like the combination of like cities and design and geometry and mathematics and art. And all of the art, like if you go back through my sketchbooks, all of the art that I have is buildings. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do at university, I had a mentor at the time, and I was speaking through like different career paths. And I was like, I've got this idea of maybe studying architecture. And long story short, he was like, do you have any connections in the industry? Does anyone in your family work in architecture? And I was like, no and no. And he was like, don't do it. Because an architecture degree is 7 years long. If you want to do it, the best place in the UK is probably the Bartlett at UCL. I ended up actually doing my master's at the Bartlett, which I'll talk about later. If you're going to do that in London, 7 years on basically no salary, and you don't have an outcome from the end of it, it's going to be a tough one. At the same time, I was always interested in enterprise. And so I wanted to study something at university. So I ended up going to LSE, and I did applied economics, a mixture of like economics and geography, what we call sort of spatial economics, urban economics. So it's still related to cities. And then when I was there, I used to go to museums all the time when I was at uni. I lived in Holborn, where my halls were. So I'd go to the National Gallery, I would go to the Tate Modern, the Tate Britain, all these cultural buildings. And even when I was at school, we used to go to trips to Paris and to Barcelona. I was fascinated by the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. In Paris as well, you see so many unbelievable bits of inspiration that stuck with me. So throughout my time at LSE, I always had this, I would say, interest that was on the side that I didn't immediately pursue. So then fast forward, you've done your degree, you're now looking for jobs. All my mates were going into banking, management consultancy, finance. So then I was like, peer pressure when you're at uni, you're like, okay, maybe I should go into banking. And so I kind of flirted with the idea of going into private banking, which is essentially managing wealthy people's money. And I did an internship across India in Delhi, and it was in a family office in Delhi.
Nice.
And
how was that?
That was great. I mean, but what I realized when I was there is, so I was this guy from London who studied economics, and they always kind of wanted my perspective. And so we went out to a meeting to see one of the clients, and I think it was 2013, 14, just after the financial crisis. Mm-hmm. The Fed started to taper back on all the quantitative easing. And that had a really detrimental effect on emerging market currencies. So the rupee against the dollar devalued from like 80 rupees to $1 to like 120, like basically over a fortnight. Yeah. And everyone was panicking. And so I got invited to his meeting. We went to this guy's house, right? And you walk in through the gates, you go in, marble floors, and you look around and you're like, wow, like there's art on the walls, there's plants, there's all this like amazing interior design. So we talk about interest rates and we talk about what's happening with the Fed. But I realized, I'm like, at the end of the meeting, I was like, sir, like, where does your interest in all this art come from? And he's like, look, it's not me, it's my wife, it's my children. His children studied in, I think, Oxford, Cambridge, something like that. Like, and it got me thinking that actually, if this is just one guy in India who has a house and all this stuff, what about all the other people around the world? And when you start to think about that, you start to think that actually with people of a certain caliber, interest rates is not something, they do think about it, but they start to think about other things. And there's a reason why people collect. There's a reason why people buy Rolexes and art. And it sounds crazy to say, when you're thinking about things like cost of living and all this other stuff that's going on, but it's a fact of human life, and it has been for centuries. And so my first job, then I was like, okay, there is something here with finance, commerce, and the art industry that I want to explore. I actually came across this master's, and it was called Art Business, and there was one module called Art Finance and Investment that I was like, okay, this is interesting. I've just done this whole thing in private banking, and I have an interest in economics. Let's try to explore this. And I did the master's, and 8 months into the master's, so around April, usually start in September, around sort of April, May, there was a job opening at Sotheby's auction house as a data analyst, and I applied to it, and I got it, and I then had to convince the Education Institute that can I work full time and do my master's dissertation at the same time. Mm-hmm. never really been done before. So it was quite a lot of difficult conversation at the time. But anyway, I got this job at Sotheby's, amazing job. Kind of like almost like a dream job, because it's a very interesting institution. It's been around for 300 years almost. When it was on the stock market before the pandemic, it was the oldest company on the New York Stock Exchange. Deeply rooted in history. And I was like a data analyst at Sotheby's. That's a cool thing.
Yeah, and it's also quite surprising because you wouldn't expect such an old institution to be forward thinking when it comes to data analytics, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I managed to actually craft a really interesting career when I was there. And so my job at Sotheby's, the data analyst role, was to work inside of business development. And my main job was to basically win business using proposals and different business development techniques. And at that stage, it was essentially Sotheby's versus Christie's. You know, it's like...
When you're talking about clients, sorry, are you talking about private collections, those people as clients? So you want to be able to sell their stuff?
Yeah, so we had a threshold. So my team would only work on individual paintings or lots over £5 million or $10 million, or collections over £20 million, $30 million. Otherwise, all the specialists that work at Sotheby's had to do their own business development. They had to do their own schmoozing, they had to do their own business development. But if they wanted a bit more firepower, they would come to us, and we would put together a proposal, some analytics, an argument. And at that stage, when you're talking about works at that level, there's only two places you can go. It's Sotheby's or Christie's. Mm-hmm. It's basically Lionel Messi's Barcelona versus Cristiano Ronaldo's Real Madrid at that stage. And obviously it comes down to the deal. Like if you've got a blue period Picasso, which there's probably only 20 in the world, and you're looking to sell it, you have way more bargaining power. And just quickly, the business model of auction houses is that they never buy the work. They broker the deal in an auction setting. So they take a commission from the buyer and from the seller. When you've got very rare work, you can, as a seller, you can drive down that commission. Sometimes the auction house might even incentivize you to sell with them. And anyway, my job throughout all of this is I was doing proposals for London. I was helping out the team in Paris, Geneva, and Hong Kong on these really high ticket items, really. And so I would do analytics. I would understand what's the impressionist market doing at the moment versus the contemporary market. And by the way, I was across different markets. So I was looking at impressionist, contemporary, old master paintings, diamonds, classic cars, classic watches, a whole range of things. Mm-hmm. And so I would have to do very quick turnaround analytics on these different markets. Sotheby's had a lot of proprietary data. And so as I was doing this, it was a very niche thing. I was kind of the only person doing this. And there was this whole data visualization, data science thing emerging. And I used to go to loads of meetups. I had way more energy when I was sort of 22, 23, 24. And I'd go to all these meetups in London. I'd be like, oh, wow, this data visualization thing's quite cool, or this data science thing's quite cool and emerging. So I think it was in my third year at Sotheby's. Sotheby's was a great time. I'm still in contact with my boss. I actually played cricket for them last Friday.
Oh, nice.
Which is fun. So I'm in touch with them. It's a great organization, but for me, it was always a means to an end. Mm-hmm. And I get onto my sort of entrepreneurial desires later. But when I was there, in my third year working at Sotheby's, I got offered a scholarship, and I applied to, and we can dig into this a bit more. There was a degree at UCL running called Data Science and Visualization. And I was like, this is cool. I can be a data scientist in the art market, mm-hmm. and I can improve my skill set by taking a part-time master's in research. So it's not a full-time PhD, or it's not a full-time master's. It was spread over 5 years. I could go in 1 day a week, and I could basically improve my skill set and improve my sort of career chances. That was the thinking at the time. And so I got offered a scholarship to do this. So then I said to my boss, I was like, look, I want to get better. I want to get access to data science and data visualization. I've just got accepted onto this master's in research at UCL, at the Bartlett. It's a great opportunity, but I'd love to continue working at Sotheby's. And so we found an arrangement, and I was doing my job 4 days a week. I was studying 1 day a week. And the year after, I got promoted. Well, not promoted. I got moved out to New York on a secondment to kind of help the team in New York, especially the senior team. They just acquired an AI startup, and the AI startup was basically doing recommendation stuff before it was cool. So like 2018, 2017.
What do you mean by recommendation stuff?
So their solution was that if you had something that you were interested in, or let's say you had a painting or a work of art by Banksy in your collection, you could drop the image into their system, and they would find different works of art that are similar to that. So it's this sort of recommendation algorithm, or you can say, I like this painting, or I like this style, and it will come up with some others. It will recommend some others. So it's like visual recommendation system. And so Sotheby's just acquired the startup. It was about a team of like 6 or 8 people. And I was moved out to New York.
What was the rationale for them buying it?
So many. I mean, I don't know too much, but if I was to guess, I would say that it'd be a mixture of using the tech, and they are still using that tech in their offering. But also, at the time, Sotheby's was a public listed company. So it could have been a strategic play. I don't know if people listening remember, but at the time, 2016, 17, 18 was a bull market, and there was a lot of M&A activity happening. And I think Sotheby's looked to acquire that company for tactical reasons. But the year before, Christie's, the arch enemy, had also acquired a company. So there was a lot of stuff happening, and that secondment was sort of set in stone for about 10 months. And the reason for that was because I had this like gap between when I finished my module to when I started back in September, and to start the next year. And so when I was there, I was always thinking, should I stay a bit longer? Should I not? But it got to the stage where I was getting towards the end, and I was like, I can't be like in London part-time doing a master's, then in New York 10 months, then coming back and trying to finish a master's. And I think I was 25, 26 at that time. And I saw all of this AI activity sort of starting to kick off.
When you say you can't do it, is that because you just felt exhausted or like drained? Like, what do you mean by when you said you couldn't do it?
I think what I've learned by doing multiple things at once is actually there gets to a stage where you can't be juggling 5 things and be executing on all of them. And so I was like, I've got this scholarship, I've got this opportunity to do this degree. Let me just like do it. And I'm going to say something a bit contradictory, but at the same time, I've always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to get into entrepreneurship, or at least want to use the energy that I still had to explore entrepreneurship. And I had, there was a few different mentors hanging around, and it's different for different people for different reasons, but usually I would suggest if you want to get into entrepreneurship, it's better to do it when you have less commitments, you have less opportunity cost, because that's not to say people who are older can't start businesses or do businesses, but it's harder. The opportunity cost is harder. And so I felt at the time that I was like, I've been at Sotheby's, and whilst I was there, they gave me a lot of free rein actually to talk about my work. And this is where I started to build a name for myself as a cultural data scientist. At the time, I was appearing on podcasts and going and doing public speaking, and I was making videos, and I built a modest following of around 30,000 followers on social media around me as a data scientist in the art market. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to go from a data analyst, for them to let me study part-time, I became one of the company's first ever data scientists. And I was kind of right at the sort of top, and I was like, right, I've built an amazing brand for myself. I've got all these followers. People know me for being a data scientist in the art market. This seems like a good time to now go and leverage that. And so that same autumn, I applied for Entrepreneur First. and I got accepted onto Entrepreneur First. And this is where I was like, okay, now's your ticket. Do you want to take it or you don't want to take it? And so I took it. I was like, right, I want to go on this. I want to go on this thing. I heard from a few other friends that that Entrepreneur First was a good place to go, and that's where I met you, Yemi, obviously. But EF, that at that moment, I was kind of like, it's when I had all those things around. Then I was like, I can't be doing all of this. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So then I got into Entrepreneur First.
Were you still working at Sotheby's at the time?
No, I decided to leave and do my masters. Continue to do one module, but I applied for EF around the same time.
Okay.
Because I think the applications for April had opened up in September, and I applied for it.
So did you quit to join EF or like?
No.
Okay,
I
so you quit to do the masters.
Continue to do the masters.
Yeah. And then you said, let me just do this program.
Yeah. Because I calculated how many modules do I have left.
Yeah.
And I still had 2 more years. And so I did that winter module from September to December, but I skipped the whole of 2019.
Got it.
I told UC, I was like, I'm not doing any modules 2019.
I want to do this.
Only because I got accepted onto EF. There was a few people that encouraged me to apply. They were like, oh, you've just come back from New York. There's this new thing, blah, 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 like have a look. And my application to EF was a bit of a hedging my bets. Like I didn't really think I'd get in. I was like, I'd apply. I'll get my foot through the door. And then when I'm ready, maybe in the summer, I'll apply again, because a lot of people who go to EF apply 2 times or 3 times. So yeah, it's a little bit contradictory from what I said before, but it was one of those things. I think whenever you have an opportunity, it's always important to really assess if it's a good one. That takes a lot of skill to actually assess if an opportunity is a good one. Once you've made a judgment that is a good one, you need to take it.
How did you assess that this was a good one for you then?
Oh, I'd spoken to about 4 or 5 people that had gone on EF, and a lot of them told me it was the one.
But even it's interesting because you could have stayed at Sotheby's, right? Continue to build your brand out, especially as you're doing your masters, and that could have led to other opportunities, whether it be starting your own like consultancy to work with other art houses and other areas in the whole like art industry, or starting a business that's completely different, or working for another company. So how did you weigh up between that versus doing EF?
Interestingly, I still do quite a lot of consultancy on the side.
So you weren't giving it up.
So actually the thing that got me through 2019 and 2020 was the fact that I was doing cultural data science consultancy on the side.
Got it.
And my day rate was quite high, and it was getting some income in. So yeah, I got to that stage where I had a really good network, and I was like, I don't need to be wearing a suit and tie every day, coming in Monday to Friday. At least right now, I might want to do that when I'm 50 or whatever, but at right now, I've got this window of opportunity to explore entrepreneurship when I'm 26. Let's give it a go. And EF was a really great, I would say pretty much the only option I would have taken if I had different options at the time. So got onto EF. It was really great. There's definitely pros and cons. Don't think we need to go into that necessarily, but so when I was going to EF, I was very clear with what I wanted to get out of it. I was like, okay, I'm this cultural data scientist. I've got followers, people know me. I've worked in the art market. I've got this like domain expertise in the cultural and creative industries, and I was doing some consultancy as well. And I'm very interested in data science and this like cusp of AI and machine learning that was really just starting to happen in 2018, 2019. Arguably it was happening before, but I think that was a good time for me. And when I was there, I was like, okay, I don't want to be doing something that's not within that interest. Like I don't want to be doing food delivery. I don't want to be doing insurance tech. Like I want to be doing technology for culture and creativity in some capacity. And so the first the first team, with EF, you try to form teams and you break up and you try to find new people. The first team I got involved with was a sort of computer vision city application thing.
Oh, what was it again?
We're trying to do smart cameras in like city applications.
Okay.
And then, after like 4 weeks, I was sort of like, I was going back home and like explaining to my girlfriend that I was working on it. And she was like, Vish, this is not you. Like this, what you're trying to sell me is like not you sort of thing. And then, when you sort of like take a step back and then you sort of, you're sitting in a park thinking about things, you're like, yeah, this is not me.
I'm just selling myself a dream.
Yeah, this is not me. And so you need to be honest with yourself. And so then the next day I broke up. I said to the person I formed with, like, look, this is not what I want to be doing. Let's just call it quits. And by that time, so in EF you have 12 weeks to form an idea. I used up 6 weeks basically. So then I was like, at that time I was like, oh, maybe this is not for me, Got 6 weeks left, I have to find an idea. Maybe I should just go back to doing the art consultancy stuff. But was like, look, you've got on this thing, everyone here's smart, everyone here wants to build a business, everyone here's got the willpower to see it through. Let's just roll the dice one more time. And that's where I met Liam, actually. And really interesting story. So basically, both me and Liam are on the bench, so to speak. And so Liam's a very interesting guy. He's like super tall, quite shy, but very, very smart. Liam also comes from the creative industries. Like he did his whole PhD in media and arts technology, and is just like a world-class engineer in terms of building firmware and software for embedded computing. But he also had a deep interest in photography, and he knows a lot about vintage cameras and vintage lenses and that sort of stuff. And so one part of the story I didn't mention before is that, when I was operating as this cultural data scientist in the art market, I was using cameras. I was sitting like this in front of video sets. I understood a bit about cameras. The only reason I cared about cameras was because I wanted to translate a message across video to people. And I noticed that the sort of creator economy was also bubbling at that time as well. And so Liam wrote a one-page PDF when both of us were on the bench. And he was like, Vish, I've got a proposal. And I was like, okay, I've been doing proposals for the last 5 years. Let's hear yours. And his proposal was something along the lines of, you are a data scientist in the creative sector. You've got followers on social media. You understand the creator economy and where things are going. I have this deep hardware expertise, and I know how to build software for hardware. And I also have this passion for photography. So let's get together and think about this new generation camera that takes advantage of AI on device, on the edge, and is built entirely from scratch for content creators. And I was like, bro, are you mad? I was like, are you crazy? Like a camera?
Yeah.
Because I was never when I was at Sotheby's or when I was going through my career, I never thought that I'd be building a camera, or at least something for something like that. I knew that I wanted to be building tools and AI-enabled tools for creatives and creators and the cultural space, but I never would have thought that incarnation would be a camera. And so obviously I had to de-risk some of that decision making. So I had to be like, let's put together a camera and see if we can make it work, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so really quickly, we rapidly iterated. We had some, I actually have a few design skills as well. So I know my way around web design and Adobe Illustrator and that sort of stuff. So we put together some rough designs, and we used some off-the-shelf components. I remember it being a Google Coral processor board and some cameras. And Liam could literally within a matter of days demonstrate that he could do this. Wow. And I was like, okay. So then we, unfortunately, when we got to week 12 at Entrepreneur First, you have to pitch to investment committee. Basically, Entrepreneur First, if you draw a quadrant of B2B, at the top and B2C on the y-axis, and then software and hardware on the x-axis. Entrepreneur First is all about B2B software.
Yep.
We were like B2C hardware. So we're like in the wrong quadrant completely. And the other thing I said to Liam when we came up with the idea, I was like, if we're going to do this, no matter if we get funded or not get funded on Entrepreneur First, are you committed to this? Like, are we going to take this to market? Because even when you do some quick back of the envelope calculations, you can very quickly determine that this is a pretty big potential idea. And we did other things to de-risk it. It wasn't just technical de-risking. We actually went and interviewed 100 people. Like, we spoke to 100 people face to face, and we asked them, like, when do you use your phone? And why do you use a phone? When do you use a camera? In what different situations? There's a reason why Dream Factory and places like this use cameras to record content. So we had to like understand what the pain point was. We didn't just want to be two guys in a garage building a camera sort of thing. Yeah. We had to like go and speak to people and understand like why they're using cameras, for what situations, what are the motivations. And so we did that research alongside the technical. And we got to week 12, we pitched it to IC, and honestly, it flopped, sort of thing. Actually, before that, we came up with the name Alice. I can talk about that, like just shortly. Go. So me and Liam are building this camera, this AI accelerated computational camera, this new generation camera for content creators. And so I'm going to an art opening with my old friend Carolina from Sotheby's, who I used to sit opposite for like 4 years. And Carolina is, she's Italian, she studied English, she does poetry and creative writing. And so we're walking down the street in Marylebone to go to this art opening. And I'm sort of explaining to Carolina, I'm like, Carolina, we're working on this AI accelerated computational camera. And she's like, Vish, what the fuck does that mean? Sort of that's non-PC, but like, she's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like AI, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't even know what that means, sort of thing. So I was like, we're building a camera. It's a computational camera, but we're using AI. She's like, look, you need a better name. It needs to be snappier. People need to get it. So then I was like, have you got any suggestions? I swear to God, 3 seconds, she was like, what about Alice? AI, accelerate, blah, blah, Alice. Alice through the looking glass. It's memorable. People can associate with it. And so that's where it kind of came from. And
it was also a good coincidence as well.
Very good coincidence. Yeah, very good coincidence. Because when we went to IC, Alice Bentinck is one of the one of the owners of EF. So when I told Liam that the day after, he was having like a full English breakfast, and I was like, Liam, we've got a name for the camera, Alice. And it was. I remember being in the workspace, and then you're like, yeah, the name's Alice through looking glass. I was like, what the hell is that? It is Vishal's like last shot attempt to make sure. Yeah. Just like trying to get the 3 hoops, like really going for it. But you got it. This is what I come down to. Like, you got to stick with stuff. Like, you got to really test it out. You can't just keep chopping and changing and hoping for the best. Like, if you got something and you think it makes sense, you've got to find a story and a narrative a compelling story narrative that you can build around that thing that makes sense. That comes back to the cultural data science thing. All it is a name. Yeah. It's semantics. But actually, what I've done is built a whole story around what it means, why it's useful. And that's the same with any innovation. It's the same with Alice Camera. It's a name that captures what we're trying to do. The vision, the values, and everything else. And so, yeah, it was a difficult one pitching Alice Camera to Alice in IC. And I think the feedback was that they really liked us as people. They really liked that we had both from the creative industries, both technical, but they just thought that building an AI-enabled hardware B2C camera was a long shot. So, we didn't let that get to us, and we were like, we can still take this somewhere. And at the time, I think it was a bit difficult because both of us were still doing like some consultancy stuff to keep things afloat, but we're still doing some customer research. And then Vic, my brother, was leaving his job at JP Morgan, and we managed to get him involved as well as a third co-founder, an equal co-founder. And so Vic really helped out more on the operations side, on the finance side. And we got to a stage where we put in an Innovate UK grant. And arguably, we might have dodged a bullet because we got £200,000 of funding 6 to 8 months after EF without giving any equity away, which is more than double what they offer. So
between the time of getting rejected from IC and raising the Innovate UK grant, were you also speaking to other investors, or was it a case of let's wait a little bit, let's define the idea a bit more, and therefore go ahead and try again?
Yeah, we weren't speaking to investors. We actually had, once we were rejected, we were like, okay, we need somewhere to like incubate this thing. And so we applied to UCL Innovation Enterprise, and we got onto that, and they gave us free office space. We spent I think about 6 months in total going through that. Accelerator was great. It was the right thing at the right time for us.
Yeah.
Got a lot of free legal advice, got free office space, that sort of thing. And yeah, then through that, we had someone from UCL Innovation help us with the Innovate UK application.
Got it.
And they were like, based on where you want to go, based on the people you want to hire, based on the immediate engineering development that was required, we think 200K is something that is enough, achievable. And so we did the application, and we were lucky enough to get it.
That must have been a nice breath of fresh air.
Oh my God. Speaking of breath of fresh air, I was in Wales, in the Brecon Beacons, beautiful fresh air, when I found out. So me and my girlfriend were kind of hiking basically for like a few days. And I remember it. I remember just being so relieved because, I just got a text from Vic saying we got the Innovate UK grant.
That's awesome.
And it was a nice. It was such a good feeling. I remember it now, and I think Ord's got a photo of me somewhere, like celebrating when we got it.
So the way you were doing that, because obviously you, like Liam convinced you in the first place around like the need for it, the whole creator economy, and then you yourself, you said originally you didn't see yourself doing something like this. So at that point, or when you were building it, how were you convincing yourself that you were the right person to build a company such as this?
Great question. I think fundamentally, if you are crazy enough to believe that you can go through an entrepreneurship program and try to build, it doesn't have to be an AI camera, it could be any startup from scratch, take it to the market and make a significant impact on the world, make a significant impact on the products and services available to people, actually solve people's problems, you got to back yourself.
Yeah.
Like regardless, you got to back yourself. And in almost, if I rewind and I look at the different paths that I've taken, whether it was me going to LSE and then going to Sotheby's, which was actually, a lot of my mates were going into private banking, and I went to the art world, and then going from the art world to entrepreneurship. Across all of those different touch points, I've always backed myself to find a way to make it work. And yeah, you got to do it with a smile on your face. You got to do it. We can get into like passion and what drives you, but sometimes people say that follow your passion is bad advice. I'm not saying it's bad. I don't think it's bad advice. I think you should always have a passion for something. And through this conversation and through everything you learn about me online, I'm very passionate about the culture and creative sector. And I want to bring technology to that space. I'm passionate about it. But at the same time, passion can also lead you down a path that is sort of like delusional. So you need motivation. You need this intrinsic motivation. You need to get up. You need to, iron your shirt and get cracking. And you need to back yourself to do it. So I don't think I ever had doubts that I was the right person to do it. I think that I've always wanted to build a startup, and I've always wanted to build tools. And I've just backed myself that, I think this got a good idea. I think I have the ability to lead a team to get this product out. And leadership's quite interesting. I've played a lot of cricket actually growing up, like tons of cricket. Throughout my whole career, when I was at high school, when I was at university, I've always played cricket. And there's been periods where I've been captain or vice captain, but what I love about cricket is that it's a team of 11, sometimes 13, 15 people. And cricket's great because you have different personalities. I'm a bowler, right? And so I don't like batting, just like doing my bowling. And when everyone's batting, I want to put my flip-flops on and read The Economist or like read some newspapers and have a few beers. But everyone, you have these different personalities. So I think about my team as like almost like a cricket team. But anyway, yeah, you just have to back yourself and you just need to believe that you're the right person. But it does come back from what are your passions? Because again, if I was doing a food delivery thing, I think I won't have the passion, therefore I won't have the intrinsic motivation. Therefore I wouldn't be getting up with the same energy to execute on it. So it's really important to understand what your passions are and what drives you, what's going to drive you to do something. And for me, clearly technology for culture and creativity is what drives me.
It's interesting because like when I think of the skills you were using when you were working at Sotheby's or working with other art houses, ultimately you're using data science as a way for them to make more money, right? Mm-hmm. Because the data sets that you're looking at is passed, sold and bought and the rest of it, right? So it's good that element of, say, the art industry didn't slap it out of you. Yeah. You know, like it didn't over commercialize and make you feel, for lack of a better word, cheap.
Yeah.
Because I do wonder, like with the Alice camera, and you're focusing on creators, right? And with all the work that's happening with AI, so how have you been able to acquire customers, especially with something which is a hardware company where there's going to be loads of bugs, it's going to be very expensive, especially if you're the first person that buys it, compared to when you benefit from like economies of scale and the rest of it. So how have you been able to like bring people on board that journey?
A lot of data and pretty much using quite a lot of techniques that I would use at Sotheby's, just using data-driven business development techniques. At the time, you know, you have to be smart, right? So when we were doing a lot of this interviewing people, and by the way, it's not about just being smart because you can kind of game the system, but you've got to have something, you've got to have enough of a hook to actually get the meeting in the first place. And we believed that this product, the way we positioned it between on one end a smartphone, another end a camera, something that's a hybrid in between, was enough of a hook to actually land those meetings. And it still is. Yeah. We've been doing this since back end of 2019, early 2020. And it's still a radical product that turns people's heads on the streets of San Francisco and Los Angeles. And so, yeah, it comes down to, you have to have something that can draw people in and into the meeting. So we had that, we had the product. So then you have to have an automated or a system in place where you can like either go through LinkedIn or you go through Instagram. And so it was a lot of just manual, literally. People think big data is like the silver bullet to everything. You don't need big data. You need really good small data that is good quality. So if you've got a spreadsheet of 100 people, 100 emails or 500 emails, then you need to calculate, okay, I've got 500 emails that I've collected. What's the conversion going to be? Am I going to land, if I land 50 meetings, you got a 10% conversion. But actually, maybe we should aim for 20. So it was just a mixture of like taking that data-driven approach, following up with people with something cool that we had. And honestly, most of it is just word of mouth. So when you find one photographer or creator that really likes it, he or she tells their friends, you bring them in, you show them prototypes, and that's the way we've been doing it. It's just literally word of mouth, to the point where you're literally 6 degrees away from someone huge. Yeah. And if you think of, and this is where cultural data science comes into play. I did a bit of network science when I was studying, and if you understand society as a network, I don't want to go meta with this, but like, the reason there's a lot of inequality in society is actually because people don't fully appreciate that humans are networked species. There's a reason why people apply to get these awards and stuff, is because it comes down to your network. Your network is your net worth. It's very cringy and cliche, but actually there's a reason why people send kids to private school and to universities and stuff. Is the world and society is a networked thing. Culture is networked. And so if you understand that principle, you can start to really think, okay, who are the most important people in the photography camera network? Can I get access to that person? If I can can they introduce me to 2 or 3 other people that are also big in the space? And from that, we've turned that into loads of pre-orders. We've turned that into over 30, 40,000 people around the Alice Camera brand. We've got press coverage from Wired, Wallpaper, Tech Radar, a bunch of others. So yeah, you just thinking as a data scientist in that particular application was very helpful, because I was doing all of that whilst Liam was like slogging away coding and trying to get this thing to work. And then at the same time, Vic was also doing some sales and managing the operations and making sure things were going smoothly on the finances side. So yeah, I do think that the data science played a really important role actually in acquiring and getting us to where we are.
Yeah. Because another question I was gonna ask was just more generally like how data science itself can improve well-being for some of those societal challenges, because as you mentioned, people being like feeling more isolated, then you've got xenophobia, then you've got like obesity to a certain extent, like just general challenges. And I wonder, because data science does the one thing whereby you can analyze and see the data, but it's also the so what, and how does that come into play? Like who takes control of that?
Yeah.
So
I've thought about this philosophically quite a bit actually. So okay, let's compare 2 or 3 groups of people. So you got one group person lives in Hackney, right? I'm going to play to a few stereotypes in this example, but you've got people who think about your yuppie in Hackney, right? Then think about someone who lives in the outskirts of London, maybe, somewhere like Romford, Luton, wherever, right?
Okay, cool, yeah.
And then you've got someone who is maybe from like Harrow, huge South Asian community. That geography is important and influential in so many ways that people don't fully appreciate.
Elaborate.
So if you live in a South Asian community in Harrow and you come from a South Asian family or whatever, it's more probable that on social media you are following influencers, people from that community. Similarly, if you if you are from Luton, it's more likely that you are following people maybe who like football, and all of your Instagram feed is full of football memes and football interviews. If you live in Hackney and you're a yuppie that works in advertising, it's more likely that you might have your whole feed is full of like plants and vegan restaurants and stuff like that. What that does is it warps your perception. Because everything that you're seeing on social media, people are spending hours a day on their phone. Your whole algorithm is catered around that particular society. And people don't appreciate, it's really important to curate your social experience. Because if you're not cognizant of that, the algorithm will eat you, and it will change your perception in such a way that it feeds into these biases. It feeds into xenophobia. It feeds into obesity. It feeds into a whole bunch of things. If you're just seeing crisps ads on your social media the whole time, obviously you're going to be obese. So I think the reason I would really advocate for things like meditation. I do a lot of Headspace, and we can talk about that after, but I do tons of Headspace to the point where I've done over 12,000 hours on Headspace.
Wow.
I meditate. When I meditate 20 minutes at a time. I don't like to be interrupted. And I've done 12,000 hours because I just need to be more present. I need to be more, when I get on my phone, I need to think, why am I doing this? Let's put it back. I need to think, shit, I'm spending too much time doom scrolling on TikTok. Let's put it down. People are not cognizant of these little signals. And if you're not cognizant, very quickly it can take over your life, and it can make you feel sad. Something that's really annoying me at the moment is a lot of newspapers in particular, mainstream media, are feeding into AI being this sort of like nuclear bomb, doomsday thing. So there was an article on the BBC. The headline was, AI will destroy humanity, says experts. And you're like, guys, what's the point? Why are you doing that? And then you think about all these other, and Matt Clifford from EF was misquoted in, I think, the Telegraph or the Times for something along the lines of AI is going to take everyone's jobs. The media understand that controversial headlines gets clicks,
Yeah.
and that's the way they need to survive. So they play these dirty tactics. And I just don't think enough people are present and cognizant of and critical of that thing.
See,
I'm not sure.
I agree with you, right? But on that point, I feel sometimes hysteria can be a good thing, because on the point of saying, oh, AI is going to destroy humanity, by making more people aware of what's going on, then that's going to force people in power to make certain changes, right? Because I feel the way policy that happens either in the US or the UK, it's been overrun by tech corporations who have deep pockets, can actually like pay people to do what they want to do.
Right.
And even with AI, maybe the horse is already bolted from the stables, that it's too far gone, we can't catch it. But there's been other instances in the past where, let's talk about like social media influencers or the general fake news things, like these elements where we've tried to combat it, but it happened after damage was done. And now I think with AI, when we're talking about the impersonation of people, like we hear a lot about revenge porn, for example, right? That's revenge porn in 2023. What about in 2030?
Yeah.
You know?
Vision Pro,
all of these different aspects where if we don't have a strong grip on privacy, then I don't know what's going to happen, because GDPR, for example, as stifling as much as it's just made the whole web experience awful in Europe, we're still in a much better place than they are in America, because a lot of the times, like people will find their images as part of these AI trained models, and they never gave any permission for it, but somehow, some way, it's already been caught up in that system. So I don't know. I feel like hysteria, on the one hand, can be good in the sense that it can make people wake up, but to your point, don't always show the negatives. Show people what the positives that might come out of some of these new technologies as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that you're totally right, that slapping people around the face and waking them up to the boogeyman or something, you know, what's around the horizon is an important thing. And I don't for a second think that, you know, people are, or society or groups of people are not smart enough to be critical and assess for themselves. But the point I'm making is that psychologically, there's a lot of evidence to show that the way in which the user experience of social media and smartphones have been created is to keep us addicted.
100%.
It's to keep us, it's to trick our brains psychologically. And so I think more and more of that's being surfaced and more people understanding that, and that's great. But yeah, I think there's been a period of time between when the iPhone first came out and now where a lot of people have taken for granted and don't fully understand some of those psychological tricks that have been played on us. And I think kids should learn about critical thinking. Like they should totally criticize or be able to be like, is that photo of the Pope with the Balenciaga thing actually a real thing or not? Like in the case of that, the Mid-Journey Balenciaga Pope thing, we should by default have in the metadata of these images the model that was used to create these things, the year was created, much like when you take a photo. When you take a photo, you know it's iPhone 14 Pro taken on June 5th. You know, you understand all that metadata. That should be in a Mid-Journey photo. Why isn't it not in a Mid-Journey photo? If it is, it will allow people to have a sense of trust, can trust the media that they're digesting. But yeah, I guess I'm just advocating for more critical thinking because, as you say, these tech companies, these big organizations have been proven to play psychological tricks on us.
Yeah. I agree. Critical thinking is a key thing. Question everything, as they like to say, right? So as you're building out Alice, and like one of the key things, because building a hardware company is tough. There's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of lead times, like dealing with manufacturers. It's a big and hard undertaking. So how did you keep yourself, I guess, motivated on that journey? Because we're in 2023 now. You said it started in 2019.
Yeah.
So you went through COVID, like all the different aspects. Like what was your driving motivation that kept you going? And on top of that, was there a particular setback or failure which made you reconsider this whole journey?
Yeah. So what kept me going? So firstly, hardware is hard, but software's soft.
Yeah.
And I always like to get that out. But what I mean by that is that with software, it can fall apart really quickly. A lot of competitors can quickly emerge, and we're already seeing this. Like people ask us, what's your defensibility? Well, we've been through a global pandemic. We've been through AI semiconductor shortage. We've been through supply chain issues when it comes to shipping from China, and we're still growing. So hardware is hard, but it also means that because it's so hard, less people choose that path. So, if you're climbing a mountain, right, there's a path that goes right. It's the easy path. It's on the map. You know that you can take that path. But if you take that easy path, it will take you an extra 10 days to get to the summit. But there's this other path that not many people have taken. But if you take it, you can get to the summit in 2 days. Mm-hmm. That's how I think about Alice, is that you would have to have a lot of guts to still be sticking to that path. And when you look over your shoulder, there's not 10 other teams behind you. There's actually no one. So we're paving the path. Whereas imagine there's so many cycles that we've gone through since EF, but like the whole Web3 cycle was nuts, right?
Quick.
But you see how many founders flooded into that?
Yeah.
So many people wanted to build the next Web3 thing. It was easy. It's a software thing. You just need to pull some code from GitHub and build an app. Everyone is doing it. It's so easy. Same now. Everyone wants to get into generative. Then there was NFTs. Everyone to do NFT. Now it's generative AI. When you build software with general purpose tech like this, anyone can do it. So what differentiates you? With something like Alice, it's so difficult that not many people do it. So that's just one thing to point about hardware versus software. What keeps me motivated? I guess what we're doing is fucking cool. Like it's industry defining. There is no one doing what we're doing. Sony, Canon, Nikon, Apple, Google, Samsung. We're doing it. I love that. I love being able to, put your name against that and say, we're building something that's pioneering an industry. And so that's in itself is motivating. That's not to say that there's been periods where I've been like, oof, this is really difficult, or let's try to pivot, or let's try to do something else. I think, again, perspective is really important with these things. I actually used to hate history when I was at school, and I have a really bad knowledge of history. But as I've been getting older, I've been reading more and more history. I've been understanding like these perspectives. So interesting. We're so caught up nowadays in like the day to day, like the next video that we need to get out, or this next piece of social media, or like I just missed the train. But actually, think about the perspective, and think about what like all these interesting innovations that have happened over time. You just need to go spend literally a couple of days at the British Library and just read about a bunch of different products. And I think that perspective is helpful. And then, I also have an amazing team. Yeah. Like we got kick-ass team from not just Liam and Vic. We've got Ollie, we've got Shelley, we've got Joao, we've got Johnny. Such a nice team. It's you wake up every day and you wanna build this with these people and more people hopefully in the future. So, all those things is what keeps me going. But a startup is hard. And I just turned 30. If I was 35 with a mortgage, 2 kids, a bunch of other things, and then I was thinking of doing this, I would probably make very different decisions. I'd probably do the B2B SaaS thing, because who wouldn't? But now is the time to think of something big and ambitious and to go for it, and to take it a certain distance.
That's amazing. Yeah. And can you mention any like setbacks or failures that's happened?
Setbacks? Oh yeah, we've been delayed.
Yeah.
We've been trying to. We penciled in a delivery date of. So our first Indiegogo campaign was February 2021. Mm-hmm. It's now June 2023. We did say that we would deliver sort of back end of sort of mid 2022. That got delayed to end of 2022.
How was that? Like communicating that to customers? Did they ask for refunds?
actually our refund rate is very low. It comes back to the point that you can't get this anywhere.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's important to mention is perspective. Just go and listen to some interviews from the founders of Oculus. Oculus was delayed by 3 years, and they sold out to Facebook for whatever. So I think that what we've had to explain to customers is that when we were coming up with this idea back into 2019, we weren't expecting a pandemic, we weren't expecting a chip shortage, and we weren't expecting supply chain issues from China. If none of those things had happened, we would be having a very different conversation right now, because it would have sped us up like drastically.
Yeah.
So those things, I would say that's the biggest setback. And that's what frustrates me the most, is that there's not really much you can do about it, actually. It's sort of out of your control. It's completely out of your control, to the point where you're like, oh, but then you sort of have to get a thick skin and get used to it. And then we then start listening to interviews and start getting all those bits of like inspirations from, exactly. Get that perspective.
Because of that intersection between arts, culture, and technology, even introducing like the Alice camera as well, are we diluting the human touch, or diluting, say, the piece of authenticity, right? So, for example, when I do a piece of art, if like I'm not an artist, but if I was to draw a picture, I can say it's how I'm feeling inside. Whereas now you have a lot of these generative like AI models where you can type in a few phrases and it can give you an image. Again, if we talk about when you was at Sotheby's and your data science work was put in a pack in order to win more clients, now that's something where you're making real data in areas where it used to be very subjective and it used to be feeling towards something, and that feeling might be good, might be bad, but it's a feeling. It's something that you can't really put your finger towards. How do we make sure we don't lose that human touch when it comes to bringing together something which is so human with something which is so technical? Yeah,
it's a really interesting point, and I think that I'm optimistic that humans will continue to maintain their culture, right? I'm very optimistic about that, actually. And there's a reason why Beyonce at Tottenham was sold out. There's a reason people want to go see that. There's a reason post-pandemic people are traveling. The whole generative AI, blockchain stuff is great. It's pushing things forward. But the more and more I've been using the camera, the more and more I've been appreciating being in certain situations to actually capture the photo. There's a reason why people spend hours listening to podcasts like this. I think there was a period where short form video was really blowing up, and it still is. But some people have been, writing about recently how long form is getting back into the swing of things, and people want to spend a bit more time listening to people talking about certain things. So I'm just optimistic that we will continue to maintain our music culture, our art culture, our photography, a whole bunch of different crafts and everything like that. I'm really, really optimistic about that, actually. And in the short term, there's a lot of like noise around generative AI and is it going to replace photographers? No, it's not, because fashion brands still want people to come in and they want to still have models and stuff. They might experiment with it. Like, who didn't experiment with blockchain when it first came out, or Web3? But where is it now? Is Gucci doing a whole Web3 thing? No, they probably just completely sacked the whole idea, and now they're doing the generative AI thing, and that's great. But I still believe that we're going to try to maintain that. But I do understand I wouldn't say risk. I would say I understand the hesitation and the threat that some of these tools place, and it is threatening, actually. And I think we, as humans, feel that like instinctively. We're like, oh wow, this is like treading on my territory. Like this is threatening me, sort of thing. But you learn to live with it, and that will lead to new things that we can't think of right now. But I'm mostly I would say 90% optimistic. I'm optimistic about most things, and in this sort of one in particular, I think we'll find a way through. Yeah,
I think copywriting is going to be so important as well. Finding ways, because one thing which I just was reading about recently is that if I like your piece of work, I can get a copy of it using some AI model. Looks like it's your work, but it's not your work. You won't get paid for that. And it's those small grey areas that we just have to find some type of solution for. Right?
Yes.
So in the midst of everything, it's like you're quite optimistic. Is there anything within this space, other than your camera, that you're really like excited about happening?
I actually think the most viral and sticky applications of any emerging technology that's happening, whether it's AI, whether it's blockchain, whether it's crypto, whatever, finance, I think some of the most vibrant applications are in the creative and cultural sector, in the creator economy. And it's the one that captures everyone's imagination. I like digital art. I like seeing art created using digital tools. And I'm excited about that. I just want to see creators do crazy stuff with these tools that's experiential, that's unique, that I can go and see, that hopefully large portions of society can go and see. Ideally, there will be some funding for this sort of public art that people can go and see. But yeah, there was a period where I was really interested in public art, the ability of like transforming cities into like canvases. And I think because of COVID that dropped, but I reckon there's going to be a very big renaissance of certain cities around the world, be it London, be it the traditional ones like London, Paris, New York, or the more emerging ones like Dubai, Singapore, and other places. I think there's going to be some crazy cool public art initiatives that will really capture people's imagination, and that people will travel to go see. And I'm excited for stuff like that, really.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I've got a couple last questions for you. Role models. You mentioned that you got some sage words of advice like early in your career. Can you pinpoint to any words of advice that like transformed your perception on something?
Great question. Role models is an interesting one. Like, I think I've drawn a lot of inspiration from just like sports stars. What I remember, so one of my biggest role models is Muhammad Ali. Straight up, I have to say that. So I was in, really upset. I was in Lisbon in 2016 when he passed away. And I was like, damn, like he passed away. And I remember being in the timeout food court thing. And Rolling Stone had a little store. And there was the Rolling Stone magazine with Muhammad Ali, the famous photo. So I ended up buying it and I got the thing framed. But I don't know, it's just something about him that when you watch his videos, you listen to him speak. Firstly, no one's ever seen Muhammad Ali with a beard. He's always shaven.
Oh yeah,
always shaven. I love that. I always mostly shave. So, but also, it's just the way in which he tackles certain things I found very inspiring. So I used to watch a lot of his stuff when I was growing up. There's no particular phrases that pop to mind that stick with me right now. But, oh yeah, actually there is one. What comes quick goes quick. You know, my granddad used to say that quite a lot. What comes quick goes quick. Money comes quick, you're going to spend it. NFTs come, it goes. What comes quick goes quick. What takes a lot of time, persistence, hard work, will always be there.
I like that. So you have a very busy schedule, and especially what you was explaining before joining EF, like it sounds mad. Are there any like productivity hacks, tips, strategies, tools, anything like that that have really helped you stay on top of everything and organized? Spoke
about it a bit before, but 100% meditation.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to be present. A lot of people put too much cognitive load on their mind based on the past, bad decisions they've made, or stuff that's happened in family or whatever. That's happened. Then there's other people who put too much cognitive load on the future. What's the future going to be like? Am I going to be all right? Blah, blah, blah. And, there could be genuine reasons why you're anxious about the future. Like, I'm not saying for one reason you might not be anxious or happy or sad about the future. But when you are building a startup and you need to be making quick decisions and clinical ones, you need to be absolutely present. it's just so important to be present. So I would say meditation is one of them. I trust Google for everything. Like in terms of my organizations, Google and Apple. So email, calendar, docs, literally Google. Like they've just got it on point. In terms of notes, like I played around with like Notion and stuff like that, but actually I really like Apple Notes, and I use Apple Notes for pretty much everything.
Same, I always default.
I love Apple Notes. It's just because like I'm so ingrained in the Apple ecosystem when it comes to Macs and phones and everything else that just trust Apple. I wish they did a better job in certain other elements, but let's see what they do. Then we use ClickUp internally. We used to use Slack, but Slack was too good at being an instant messenger. It was just too good. So we needed more structure around different projects, different tasks. So we use ClickUp. And then beyond that, I still sketch. I still have a notebook and pencil. I actually exclusively write in pencil.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't actually own a pen. People give me a pen, I find it really weird to write.
Why is that?
I don't know.
So in meetings, do you take notes on your laptop or do you write?
No, laptop.
Okay.
Yeah. But if I need to do some strategic thinking, pencil, pen. Yeah. I think it's just because when I did art, like I was drawing in pencil the whole time.
Yeah.
And I used to love drawing, and it's just a habit, I think.
And to get some of your pieces of art.
Yeah.
And then last question, are there any books that you'd recommend?
For better or for worse, I would definitely read The Prince by Machiavelli. Very dark, but interesting book.
Why? I bought it, but I never read it.
So The Prince is, what's the phrase from The Prince? It's, can't remember, but The Prince is great because it's written for one of the Medici kings, or like one of the Medici rulers, and yeah, it's got some quite questionable things in there, like be a leader that's. I don't agree with everything. It's one of the phrases like it's always better to be a leader that's feared than loved, and a bunch of other things. But I just think it's a very good book. It's very small. It's very short, actually. I think it's like 70 pages. And yeah, I think it has a lot of good structures, a lot of things to think about in leadership situations. The world is not a nice place. Yeah. There are always going to be people out there that want to, knock you off your feet, and you got to be thinking about things in a political way. Sometimes you need to show up with a smile on your face, even though you don't like the person. Yeah. Sometimes you still need to have the conversation with the person. You can't just ignore them the whole time. So I think there's good life lessons in there. There's another really good one called The Richest Man in Babylon. I forget who the author is, but I remember that being a really good book in terms of understanding finance, and understanding like not to spend more than what you have, and being frugal, and spending money if you need to get a return on it. It's good to spend money on a MacBook if you're going to leverage that to get a return. So that's a really good one. Good,
brilliant. Well, Vish, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Stuff like that. Some of your social
Personally, if you just do vishalkumar.london, you'll find me. If you want to know more about the Alice camera, then it's just alice.camera. And that's it. Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure to catch up. And yeah.
Thanks so much.
Cheers, mate.